Congratulations, you have made it to 6th level, the penultimate level where you cannot level any further. After working so hard as a scout, you gain the ability Adaptive Blessing. Now it's once per life. It is an EX enchantment, which means that it does not count towards your enchantment limit, and it also states that in the description for some reason. So it just does not count towards your enchantment limit. You need a white strip, and what it does is makes you resistant to a school. Now, what is a school? Well, we talked about in our 5th level scout video about hold person being from the school of command and that barbarians are immune to command. Well, this is when you'll have to use your understanding of the game. This is when you'll need to think of, oh, a fireball? What school is it? Is it subdual or flame? I think you're able to figure that one out. You'll also try to figure out what everyone's using. If it's only scouts or assassins, well, you can make yourself resistant to command so that you would be immune to that ability, which is pretty great. You could also make yourself resistant to death, which means if an assassin's poison hits your leg, you still counter assassins even more because it's only a wound and not an instant death. A resistant ability applies to any school that you have picked. So if someone throws an entangle ball or an ice ball, both are subdual. Either one that hits you first is resisted. This is not immune. You are not immune to those effects. So if I'm hit with an entangle, resist. If I'm hit with an ice ball directly after that, I am now frozen. Now, you have to declare your school at the time of enchantment. So, I would say I enchant thee with a blessing, I enchant thee with a blessing, I enchant thee with a blessing. Death. At this point, I am now resistant to death. Before you engage, you have to also declare enchantments. So you must state Adaptive Blessing, death, or whatever you have. The reason why you must do this is because we, when declaring enchantments, try to avoid, oh, surprise things, where I'm just somehow alive. And scouts, even if you sometimes are on point, and it rarely happens that you are, some scouts have given you a bad name with Adaptive Blessing. They are able to say Adaptive Blessing, oh, resistant to flame. Next time, oh yeah, I was resistant to death. Oh yeah, I was resistant to command. They're not keeping a consistent school that they're resistant to, and they're just somehow always resistant to the proper school when needed. So that's why you want to state beforehand, resistant to death or resistant to command, resistant to subdual, whatever. Now you might think, oh, well, this makes it not that powerful. Not true. If there's a wizard trying to cast at you and they have an ice ball and you say resistant subdual, do they really want to throw at you? Do they really want to waste that spell ball? I mean, yeah, they'll burn your enchantment, but spellcasters only have a certain amount of abilities. They have to spend points to get those bits of magic. And do they really want to waste that on you? I mean, even if they throw an ice ball, they have to charge another one, and it's just not worth it. And it also can make the difference in a fight. If you say resistant subdual and a wizard or a druid has an ice ball and you charge them, they throw an ice ball at you and you still get that resistant effect. You still are able to then go and kill them. So the resistant bit is actually quite powerful. In fact, it is extremely powerful because it is once per life. You just need to be a little bit aware of what everyone's using and understand the game a little bit more, which you really should. You really should understand the game after being a scout for 6 levels because you're working with everyone, you're talking. With evolution, you're trying to figure out what enchantments people get, what spells and abilities people have. You're releasing them so you understand what schools. You really are at the point where you should understand the game and where Adaptive Blessing can be a monster. And it makes the difference between an okay scout and a great scout. There is one problem with Adaptive Blessing. The problem why many scouts just want to stop at level 4 and say, oh, the next few levels are just worthless. And that is that Adaptive Blessing cannot be worn with any other enchantment from the School of Protection. Doesn't seem too bad on paper, but when you consider that 90% of the enchantments are for the School of Protection, it gets a little bit harder. Evolution doesn't really synergize too well with Adaptive Blessing. You can't be like, oh, Druid, I can take 6 enchantments because this doesn't count as any and I get 2 normally, and you can essence graph me, oh, I can take 6 enchantments. Well, they can't apply, again, 90% of their enchantments to you. So you go out there with Flame Blade, Gift of Fire, and some other weird enchantments that don't really stack too well, like an like a stone skin, flame blade, wounds kill, and other things would. It's just not the same. So you can make it work with a bunch of enchants, but it's very hard to do. And because of that, druids are trepidatious about enchanting you when you have your adaptive blessing on. Now, the question I have for you: how often have you had a level 6 druid enchant you? Second follow-up question: how often have you been enchanted the entire game? The answer should probably be not too often for that level 6 druid, or even if it is somewhat often, not the entire game. This is where adaptive blessing comes in. Again, if there's only scouts and assassins, you could just be immune to command to get rid of that whole person. It's pretty great. If there is a warrior who has insult as their main ability, you could be immune to command. At that point, if you're just facing warriors, scouts, and assassins, being resistant to command saves you from most of their abilities, and most people just won't want to use it on you. And then you could release your teammates since it's on charge, and adaptive blessing can be used to really make you a powerhouse, since you don't always have 5 enchantments or 2 enchantments on you. I mean, it just doesn't always happen. So that's why adaptive blessing is pretty powerful, because it is also per life. Apply your knowledge of the game of what you've learned so far, which you should have a good understanding, and you will become an excellent scout, a scout that stands above the rest because of adaptive blessing, because you're using hold person, because you're going beyond where most players who play scout stop. And that's why adaptive blessing is wonderful. Now, if you want to hear about the other classes or a little bit more about LARPing in general or other LARPs, I would suggest that you like, subscribe, and ding that notification bell so you can stay informed and learn a little bit more. Keep playing as scout and stand out above the rest. Show them that levels 5 and 6 are worth getting, and that at level 6, with your in-game knowledge, you become a threat that no one else has seen before.